Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, athletes made here. The Sports Performance Center was developed with one goal in mind: to maximize human performance through movement and recovery. Their team of expert performance sports coaches and trainers will guide you to achieve your performance goals. That's the Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center, located at the Star in Frisco. This episode is also brought to you by Allen Dental Studio. Located off Bethany Drive in Allen, their office was designed with you, the patient, in mind, which means an excellent and enjoyable experience. From cosmetics to implants, you deserve a perfect smile, and Allen Dental Studio can make that happen. Also, don't want to leave out another longtime friend of the podcast, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. With locations in Carrollton and Dallas, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes offers an affordable, high-quality alternative to senior living. Call now at 469-400-7650. That's Texan, spelled T-E-X-S-E-N, Texan Senior Residential Care Homes. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, sports editor with Star Local Media, and I'm flying solo for the first half of today's episode. We'll bring on Bryan Murphy a little bit later on, but in the meantime, gotta preview the game of the week for the second round of the high school football playoffs as voted on by y'all. First off, big thanks to everybody who went to our website, starlocalmedia.com, to vote. A very, very lively turnout for this week's poll. And ultimately, though, our game of the week, we are heading down to Arlington at AT&T Stadium for a Friday night kickoff at 8 p.m. at the site of Allen versus Rockwall. I was kind of hoping this would get game of the week because I'm kind of jazzed up to talk about this one. A matchup that is certainly on the short list of the most high-profile matchups in the second round stateside. And after being front and center for that game last year when these two teams faced off in this exact round out in Garland, I mean, who wouldn't be excited to see the rematch on Friday? Last year was a spectacular game, won by Allen 52-40, but it was a back and forth game. It was a one-score contest, late into the fourth quarter. Then Allen got a touchdown to pull away for good. But this game had, over 1,100 yards of offense. I mean, big plays galore. It was a definitely the kind of game that really, I think, has helped feed into the momentum that this rematch on Friday has. So let's break her down, shall we? We're going to go four parts with this. I want to talk about first why this game matters. What about this matchup made it so befitting, to be recognized as game of the week, and then just get into some key talking points and storylines surrounding this matchup. Some paths to victory for both teams in this one, and then lastly, my prediction. So let's start. All right. So let's start with why this game matters. Allen 11-0 versus Rockwall 9-2. Both of, I believe, are state ranked. Allen for sure is state ranked. Rockwall, I believe, might be in that 24-25 range. So let's talk about this matchup and why it's so significant. First off, you have two very high-profile teams with explosive offenses and just college-level talent. I mean, both offenses come into this game averaging more than 490 yards per game. They're ranked numbers 5 and 6 in the area among 6A teams. I believe Rockwall has the slightest of edges over Allen in terms of yards per game, but they're both averaging more than 40 points per game, and you just look at just some of the talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball specifically. It's in this day and age, offense is what sells tickets, and Allen and Rockwall have plenty of star power in their respective skill positions, be it Allen with quarterback Raylan Sharp, committed to SMU, the Green Twins out wide, Blaine and Bryson, they're going to go play D1 somewhere, and then you have with Rockwall, Braden Locke, their sophomore quarterback, who's one of the top sophomore prospects in the area at the quarterback position. Their star running back, Zach Henry, who's actually a baseball commit for UTA, and then of course Ohio State commit Jackson Smith-Njigba, arguably the top overall high school football player in the state. Absolutely the best receiver that the state has, and just an absolute showcase in his own right. So again, these are two teams that you saw it last year. They can put up points with the best of them. It's and I expect more of the same on Friday. And then you have the dynamic of what Allen represents versus what Rockwall has become. come. With Allen, you're talking about, we're in the last high school football season of this decade. And when you look back on the 2010s, I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that Allen has been the team of the decade. With all due respect to the Highland Parks and whatnot, when you look at what Allen has accomplished over these last 10 years, be it the 4 state championships that were won, including the 3 straight with Kyler Murray, who's arguably the greatest high school football player in this state's history. You have the 57-game winning streak, the second longest in UIL history. The Eagles Stadium, both the good and the bad, with the stadium getting shut down for that one season. And then, right now, Allen's in the midst of the second longest regular season winning streak in Texas high school football history. So they've made as worthy a claim to being the team of the decade as anyone, and I think they have a very, very just claim to that stature. You think since October of 2012, since that winning streak, with Kyler began back in the day, since then Allen's record is 112-3. So think of that and what this opportunity on Friday means for a team like Rockwall, who's been one of the better teams in the area under head coach Rodney Webb. They've made the playoffs every year since he got hired as their head coach. They had the state quarterfinal run in 2015 before they got knocked out by Lake Travis. And then since then, they've had really good teams that have just been a hair short of being able to make another serious run. You look what happened in 2016, second round against Capel. They lost by 4. 2017, second round against Saxe. They lost by 7 in overtime, and that was a state-ranked Saxe team, best team that Saxe's ever had. And then last year, of course, with Allen, again in the second round, they lost by 12, but again, they were really close there late in the fourth quarter. So 2019, this is a chance for them to, for Rockwall to potentially get one of these signature wins in program history. Again, when you factor in that only 3 teams have defeated Allen since October of 2012, and perhaps position themselves as the favorites now to win Region 2 if they can get this done on Friday. It is a massive opportunity that is in front of both these programs. And then you just have, whether it's just general fatigue from the masses, with a program like Allen, which you've seen go to the state semifinal 7 consecutive years and whatnot, but there is definitely a growing sentiment amongst people out there that Rockwall might be capable of doing this on Friday. And I'm gonna get to my prediction later on, but I just want to say straight up that for anybody this week who is picking Rockwall to win this game, you're not crazy. That's not a silly pick whatsoever. Last year's game showed you all you need to know about the fearlessness that Rockwall plays with in this matchup, which I think is very important just for a team's ability just to hang with Allen. They gave Allen all they could handle and then some, and a lot of the dynamics of what made that game so tough for Allen are still in play for Rockwall. So as we can get to when we start looking at this matchup specifically, trust me, Rockwall's going to give Allen one heck of a game. I don't look at last year as any sort of aberration whatsoever. So yes, you're, and whether it was the job that Rockwall did in making that game competitive last season, how much that's kind of feeding into the buzz and the build that Rockwall has, the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba is playing at the absolute peak of his power, it seems. There's a lot of momentum on the Rockwall side, and again, it just might be general fatigue, when it comes to Allen, just because everyone is so used to seeing Allen just lay waste to the entire state and take care of business at the juncture of the postseason. But we'll see. That's why I'm expecting a very good game on Friday out in Arlington. So, all right, so let's get to some of the key talking points about this matchup. I just mentioned his name, and if you're talking Rockwall, you have to start with how the defense is going to approach Jackson Smith and Jigba. He is, again, the top wide receiver in the state, one of the best in the country. He's committed to Ohio State, and this is the Allen secondary versus Jackson Smith and Jigba is such an interesting matchup, because this is going to be the first time since really the first half of the regular season where we get to see Allen confront what was one of their real big bugaboos way early on. And if you remember, and we've talked about it on the podcast in the past, that early in the season there were 2 areas in the Allen aura that were a little bit below par relative to expectations. They had a really tough time in the turnover differential. It took them a while to wind up on the positive end of that equation consistently, and they had a really tough time slowing down big play wide receivers. If you think back to the start of the season, over Allen's first 5 games, they allowed 100-yard receiving performances 5 times, including twice against McKinney. And that's when you look at, again, what Jackson Smith-Njigba represents in that respect. I mean, he comes into this game with 70 catches, 1,553 yards, and 25 touchdowns. And he only played in essentially 9 games this season. You know, he was injured in the game against Longview and whatnot in the first series, so I don't even count that. You know, so he missed the following week against Horn. So I mean, when you factor in that's the productivity that he's had in 9 games this season, essentially. And you just have to look at last year, what he did against Allen. He caught 14 passes for 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's a great night for just an entire passing offense. If you complete 14 passes for 267 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that's the crazy thing about this kid, is that there are some games this season where he has been essentially a one-man receiving corps. He has 2 games with over 300 yards receiving this season. It's crazy. He's averaging 22.2 yards per catch, and it's just, there's no real one way to slow him down because he's capable of beating you short, intermediate, deep. The breakaway speed is just unmatched right now in the state. His hands and the catch radius are everything that a quarterback could dream of. And yeah, just the fact that they get him involved in so many different ways, and you got to see, I mean, Allen got a suit full of it on the first play of the game last year when I want to say it was a tunnel screen that Smith-Njigba caught and then took 81 yards to the house for a touchdown like 18 seconds into the ball game. I mean, that is all you need to know about what this kid is capable of. So, I mean, it's, on the one hand, like, you know, Allen, you'd hope that they at least have an edge over some other team just because you think of things like their defensive backs getting to practice against the Green Twins every day, you know, so that at least gives you some sort of a leg up and at least knowing what it's like to go against high-level wide receivers. But Smith-Njigba is just a completely different animal for the reasons that I've just mentioned. I mean, the speed, the route running, the hands, how difficult he is to tackle. I mean, he's one of those players where you can play the best defense of your life and then he just, you know, extends, makes some ridiculous one-handed catch, and then you're just left looking silly, and there's like nothing you can do. So part of the equation in this is just not letting those moments sink you mentally from an execution standpoint, just because he will make plays that will really kind of deflate the energy and life from a defense. So just kind of keeping the energy within your unit intact, because, I mean, Jackson's going to get his. Like, there's no stopping him. Only one team has figured out any sort of a formula to even slow him down, and that was in Rockwall, in a surprisingly difficult game for Rockwall, as they got all they could handle later in the season against Tyler Lee, a game that Rockwall only won 35-32. But Jackson was held to just 3 catches and 51 yards. So at least there is some sort of a blueprint out there for teams to adhere to if they want to try to find at least conjure some way to find success against him. But again, just because Tyler Lee had success doesn't mean that every secondary in the state can employ that same approach and have success with it, because he is just that special a talent. So again, he tormented Allen's defense last year. He actually got hurt in the second half and was unable to finish the game, if I recall. So you got to factor that in too, is that, like, you know, Rockwall didn't exactly get to go out on its own terms because their best receiver got dinged up in the second half of last year's game. So yeah, first and foremost is just being fascinated to see how Allen's secondary handles this test. You know, since then, you know, since the midpoint of the regular season, they've done well. You know, they were able to slow down another high-octane big play passing attack with Prosper. But again, like, Rockwall is just a different animal. It's not even just Jackson. You know, J.J. Williams is still there. He had a huge game against Allen last season. They've just got a lot of different guys that can hurt you. So on the whole then, all right, so how does Allen go about trying to then neutralize the Rockwall offense? You know, if you're anticipating Allen having some troubles in the secondary, as every team in the state essentially will against this team, then you think about, okay, well then they're going to need to generate a pass rush, you know, to make, you know, Braden Locke just uncomfortable in the pocket. You know, and that's one area that Allen has been pretty consistent in being able to rely on this season. As we've talked about, that's arguably the most sound unit of their entire team, is that deep defensive line with Elijah Fisher, Malik Allen, Lane Lewis, Michael Owen-Zirike, Cyrus McDougal. I mean, the list is endless. They rotate 7-8 guys in there, and they're an absolute handful on the defensive line. The problem is that Rockwall is really adept at that quick passing game, and they, you know, a lot of that offense can be derived from just getting their athletes in space, guys like, you know, Jackson Smith-Njigba, J.J. Williams, and just letting them cook in space. You know, it's a little comparable, I guess, to maybe beat a Jesuit in that respect, except with a much more explosive, brand of pass catchers. So on the one hand, like, you look at Braden Locke's numbers this season, and he's only got, like, in high school football, the way that you track sacks is you count it as a rush in our statistics. So, but you look at his rushing attempts on the season, he has 9 carries for 11 yards. Now, whether some of those are quarterback sneaks, the fact that number is so low on the number of attempts should tell you one thing. He doesn't get sacked much. He doesn't get sacked hardly at all, for that matter, it sounds like. And that's a testament to both the Rockwall offensive line and how quickly Locke gets rid of the ball. And some of that could be by design with, again, kind of the quick passes and whatnot, because, again, if you remember last year, Rockwall had a lot of success with those screen passes, especially early on against Allen. So this is a matchup that's really going to test the Allen defense's ability to tackle in space and limit yards after the catch. And I think that's probably, like, you're going to assume that, like, they're going to be able to make plays as far as just throwing and catching the ball, but you have to limit the damage there. You cannot let Rockwall rack up yards after the catch, because that will be a recipe for disaster for the Allen defense. And also, like, you have to be ready for Rockwall to take chances. I mean, if you look at last year's game, I mean, again, they played with a fearlessness that you need against Allen. They were not afraid to go for it on 4th down, and again, like, it's just, they're going to test the kind of the resolve of this Allen defense in a way that no other team has. So whereas I think that Allen's best recipe is generating a pass rush, that's going to be easier said than done, just again because no team has been able to consistently pressure Locke throughout the season. So again, we'll see what it all means. But obviously, Rockwall's, they have their own brand of problems on defense, defending the run, and that's the aspect of the Allen offense versus the Rockwall defense that I'm most fascinated in. Is Allen going to be able to run the ball with success? Because it does look like that teams have been able to have a little bit of success against Rockwall in that capacity. So you look at just the job that teams have done against them this season. So on the year, Rockwall's run defense is allowing 234 yards per game. 6 times this season, they've allowed an opponent to average at least 6 yards per carry. I mean, you look at some of the jobs late in the season by teams like Tyler Lee, who I mentioned earlier. The reason they were able to keep that game so close, and they were even in position to win that game, in the final few minutes of that contest, they had 337 rushing yards and almost 10 yards per carry. The following week, Mesquite had a great game on the ground, even in defeat. They had 487 rushing yards on 9.5 yards per carry. So they can be hurt there, and that's one thing that has been kind of the I'd say. I mean, Allen's a versatile offense. Let's say they've got the 2 Division I wideouts with the Green Twins. They can definitely throw and catch the ball for sure. Raylan Sharp's he's a quarterback commit at SMU, but they've got a lot of depth in the backfield that I think is going to be pretty vital on Friday. Now, it's been a little shorthanded in recent weeks because Selden Manning and Jalen Jenkins have been out. Now, Selden Manning is still going to be out, and he's going to be out actually for the duration of the season. He suffered an ACL injury, and that will cost him the remainder of his season, his senior season, which does stink from that respect because he was Allen's leading rusher, and he had a lot of success against Rockwall last season. And it just sucks in general because the kid's a senior, and you'd like to see him, get a more ceremonial end to his high school career than a stinking injury. So yeah, you feel for Selden Manning, but nevertheless, Allen should have plenty of horses in the backfield ready to go between Jordan Johnson, Sam Hunter, and it sounds like there's a chance they could get Jalen Jenkins back. He's missed the last few games. Head coach Terry Gamble sounded optimistic about them getting him back in the fold, and that is just another weapon in the chamber for them. And that's on top of Raylan Sharp, who is a dual threat quarterback that offers a completely different dynamic than from what Rockwall had to worry about last season with Grant Tisdale. I mean, Allen has, again, I talked about the yards per carry that Rockwall has given up on the ground. On occasion this season. And then you look at guys like the running backs that I just mentioned. Jordan Johnson, he's averaging 9.8 yards per carry. Raylan Sharp, 8 yards per carry. Sam Hunter, 8.3. Jalen Jenkins, 5.9. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. Allen's offensive line, young as it was early in the season, they've really started to come into their own as the year's gone along. And that's definitely an area that I think Allen is going to need to have success in. If you're going to, again, if the pass rush isn't there, and again, if your secondary is going to have its warts slowing down Jackson Smith and Jigba, plan C is then, okay, well, let's just limit the amount of time that Rockwall offense is on the field. And that's where I think Allen's run game can really kind of come into play. I mean, you look at how they were able to salt away that game last season against Rockwall. As close as that thing was, I want to say it was 45-40 late in the game. And then you have, Allen put together a 10-play drive where 8 of the first 9 were runs, by Grant Tisdale, Selden Manning, and then, they go over the top to Theo Weiss. He scores a 37-yard touchdown, and that puts the game away. I mean, Allen had a lot of success on the ground last year. They had 321 rushing yards on over 7 yards per carry. Grant Tisdale, their quarterback last season, had 20 carries for 150. Allen can run the ball on this team. Teams have been able to all season, and again, if Allen's going to find its way into the win column, it is almost mandatory that aspect is once again holds to form for them on Friday. And then just the question of how Allen's going to handle their first true adversity of the season, because this is, again, I said it earlier, since October 2012, their record is 112-3. And the majority of those games have been blowouts. So there just haven't been, the moments don't come along all too often when you see this team in a one-score game in the fourth quarter. And those are the moments when, you need to see the mental resolve that this team has. And it's one of those aspects of those state championship teams in the past that, you realize what they were capable of when you got to see them gut out tough games in the fourth quarter. Just because when you're a program that doesn't have to go through those moments all too often, it's a complete question mark how you're going to react, because let's be real, these are still teenage kids. They handle adversity different ways. The Capel game, you think back to week 3 of the season, it's really the only time this season Allen has been in a close game late. In fact, it's the only game that they've played this season that has been within single digits in the fourth quarter. So yes, I think there's going to be moments there in the second half where Allen is going to be pressed to some situations that they haven't been in all season long. And when you're doing so under the do or die backdrop of a playoff game, I mean, hey, it's anyone's guess how you respond to that. So I don't know. I'm anxious to find out if Allen is in fact put in those positions on Friday. And then lastly, you have the unfortunate circumstances that are, have kind of, hovered over this game with the events of last weekend and what has happened, within the Allen community. A bit of a somber week for Allen after the untimely death of sophomore wide receiver Markel Ellis, who was shot and killed at a party in Plano on Saturday. It's been talking to head coach Terry Gamble, it was definitely an emotional start to the week for Allen. These are high school kids. Obviously they handle grief differently. There's no clue how this will affect Allen on Friday. They're going to, obviously all of them, took to social media. They're dedicating the season to Markel. They're handling it. Coach Gamble said they're handling it about as well as you can expect, because these are teenage kids, and one of their teammates, he was shot and killed. You can't process that if you're, at that age, just how tough that can be on a high school kid. Allen's going to be doing what they can to honor him and his family. They're going to be wearing stickers with ME on their helmets. We'll see. Again, they've grief is handled differently, so there's no clue how it'll affect Allen. Head coach Terry Gamble said he talked with his parents, with Markel's parents, and they said that they want the football team to play and practice, and honor Markel in that respect, because that's what Markel would have wanted. You think back to 2017 when Allen won state. This is not the first time they've been down this road, unfortunately, because it was back then when another one of their teammates, Adam Gary, passed away. It was an emotional season for the Eagles there. So just a tough backdrop to this one, but yes, many a heavy heart as Allen takes the field on Friday out in Arlington. So let's see. All right, let's talk about some of the paths to victory to this one. I think Allen needs to win time of possession. I think that's, one of those, one of those underrated statistics that, again, you don't really get to tabulate in the high school level, but I think Allen needs to have time of possession on their side, because, again, there's a lot of what Rockwall does that might be able to negate the normal strengths of the Allen defense. So I think their best route to victory is just again, limiting the number of snaps, limiting the number of time that Rockwall's offense is on the field is something that teams have tried against Allen for years, to keep Allen's offense on the sidelines. But you look at what Allen's been able to do over the years, and one of the most tried and true aspects of this machine is that as the games get deeper on into the second half, the job that their offensive line and their running backs do of helping salt the game away. In a sense, you saw that last year in that decisive drive by the Eagles there late in the fourth quarter, where Allen was able to string together 10 plays and eventually put the game away with a touchdown. So I think that Allen needs to, again, if you get like a 7 to 10 point lead in the second half and kind of let your O-line and your run game pave the road to the finish line, I think winning time of possession and winning the snap count, something which Allen did not do last year. Rockwall outsnapped them by a ton in last year's matchup. I think those are two things that have to go in Allen's favor on Friday to get the victory. And then if you're Rockwall, you just have to play fearless like you did last year. I said they went for it on fourth down a ton last season. They went for it 7 times on fourth down in last year's matchup. Now, granted, they did only convert 3 of those. They never punted, but it reminds me of like when Allen would face Arlington Martin in the playoffs, and the way that Bob Wager would have his team just playing absolutely fearless, take all chances, a take all chances style of football with just the trick plays on special teams and just the requisite chances that you had to take if you were going to upset a juggernaut like Allen. You saw Rockwall play with a similar confidence last season, and I think they need more of that. I think that it would behoove them to try to lure Allen into a shootout, because I think that Rockwall's one of the few offenses in the state that is capable of scoring it with Allen point for point. Test the secondary a bunch. Defensively, if you get the sense that Allen's trying to slow the game down, Rockwall's execution on defense on first and second down becomes absolutely paramount. And then you wonder again, like I said, Jackson Smith and Jigba got hurt in the second half last season, so Rockwall perhaps didn't get the appropriate way to end its season on its own terms. So listen, if Allen is got a nice lead there in the fourth quarter and Rockwall is staring defeat in the face, go out on your shield. Again, he's the horse that brought you to this dance. Jackson Smith and Jigba deserves if his high school career is going to end, then you better go out on that shield and give him every target that he can get and give him every chance that he can to will you back into this contest. All that to be said, we could finally get to my prediction. Ultimately, though, I am going Allen in this game, and I am going Allen. I don't think by much, though. I think in the paper, my final prediction was Allen by 7. So I think this is going to be a close game, very much akin to last season. Would not be shocked if Rockwall got some revenge. I'm saying that straight up. I don't want to sound like I'm hedging my bets or anything. I do pick Allen, though, just because I trust that they will be able to effectively utilize that ground game to keep Rockwall's offense shackled to the sidelines. I've seen it too many times over the years, just the depth that they have in the backfield, coupled with the success that teams have had moving the ball on the ground against Rockwall. And those are players that aren't going to be, thrown into the fire, like guys like Sam Hunter, Jalen Jenkins, Jordan Johnson. They've got, more meaningful reps in recent weeks with Selden Manning getting hurt. Plus, again, Raylan Sharp is a completely different animal from what this team had to worry about with Grant Tisdale, whereas Tisdale was, basically a human wrecking ball trying to tackle him in the run game. Sharp has that deadly straight line speed that can just absolutely hemorrhage a defense in a heartbeat. I think Allen's run game is going to be the key to the victory in this one. Rockwall's going to get theirs, though. I foresee this being kind of like a 45-38 style game, but I have Allen coming out on top in this one and advancing to the third round of the playoffs. We'll see. I don't make this pick with much confidence, though, because again, Rockwall is a very, very formidable opponent that has a lot of ways to kind of exploit this Allen defense in the way that teams in the past this season just haven't been able to. So we'll see how much of that holds true, though. This one is Friday, 8 o'clock out at AT&T Stadium, the second half of a doubleheader out there. South Lake Carroll and DeSoto is the first game. So yeah, if you're not doing anything Friday evening, get out there, man. Again, Allen Rockwall is going to be a thriller, and so should South Lake DeSoto. Why would you want to be anywhere else if you're going to go watch high school football on Friday? All right, and let's see. The picket line, though, was unanimous as well. Everyone siding with Allen in this one to get the job done against Rockwall. So that is a look at your game of the week, Allen versus Rockwall. We've got several other marquee matchups on the docket. We'll bring in Bryan Murphy to discuss those and more after a word from the sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. And we are back. We have brought Bryan Murphy in to join the party as we continue to look at some of the marquee matchups in the second round of the high school football playoffs. We have talked our game of the week, Allen versus Rockwall. Still got a few other big games on the docket though, Bryan. So let's quick hit those, give some predictions for those ones as well, including one Friday, 7 o'clock at Eagles Stadium in Allen. There will still be football in Allen, even though it's not the Allen Eagles. This one though features two pretty solid teams, a pretty evenly contested matchup between Mesquite and Prosper. Two teams that have, their roads to this point have kind of been a little similar in the sense that they've beat up on the teams that they're supposed to beat up on their schedule, and they've taken big losses to the better teams in their respective districts. With Mesquite, it was Longview and Rockwall. Oh well, that's fine. Everybody loses to those two. And then with Prosper,
and Mesquite Horn too.
And Mesquite Horn, that's right. I should know that. I saw that game. Yeah, and that was kind of very jarring, considering where Mesquite came from, because Horn looked just so superior in that matchup. But then you have Prosper, which made short work of everybody except for Allen and Jesuit in District 9-6A, and they took two lopsided beatdowns at the expense of the Eagles and the Rangers. So something's got to give. So I don't know, Bryan, what kind of jumps out about this matchup to you? And I think you even had a score prediction in mind.
I mean, I was telling you, this is one of the tough games to pick on the picket line. It's literally a coin flip. And I'll give my score in a second, but it's really going to come down to which Prosper team is going to show up. Yeah. And you could say the same thing about Mesquite, but we've seen a Jekyll and Hyde with Prosper. We've seen a game where Jackson Berry and TJ Lane and Hayden Metcalf and that entire offense is just really, really flowing. But then when they play the big dogs, Allen and Jesuit, and obviously Mesquite is a notch below a Jesuit, I would say, but they're still a really good team. They're 8-3. Yeah. They've taken care of business against teams that they've taken care of, and if Prosper struggles out of the gate like they did against Jesuit, falls behind. I'm not too familiar with what Mesquite has to offer, but they're obviously on the come up. Their first winning season, I looked it up, since 2012. So I mean, this is a dangerous team, a red hot team, a team fresh off almost a 50-point win, and to start the playoffs against Shoemaker. It's going to be a tough one for Prosper, and I have this one. The final score, and I have a weird score alert. No. I always like those. Final score, Prosper 29, Mesquite 28. I'm not sure how they get there, if it's an overtime 2-point conversion or a bunch of field goals or what have you, but I'm expecting, a one possession, possibly a 1-point game. That's how close this is in my eyes.
With Mesquite, they're going to be as stiff a test for Prosper's run defense as they'll have seen this season. The weapons for the Skeeters are pretty vast, from their quarterback Dylan Hillard McGill, who's a Division I prospect, R.J. Bonner, KB Frazier, Jadarian Smith. They've got a lot of different ways to beat you. They average almost 9 yards a carry in that aforementioned win against Shoemaker, and they've been right around 7-8 yards per carry for those core rushers that they have for the season. Ultimately, I kind of lean Prosper in this one as well. I just like the balance that they have on both sides of the ball just a bit more. Their defense has been really stout.
It's a shutout against Wiley.
And then I watched them just completely suffocate Plano's run game. Again, like those two games against Allen and Jesuit, I think those are just more so, those kind of speak to those two teams particularly than anything that might be flawed within Prosper's defense. Plus, I think there's a little bit more versatility. Prosper can, play different styles of games on offense with their ability to spread the ball around with Jackson Berry and their deep receiving core, and then JT Lane, Tyler Bailey, and that run game. So, I think it's going to be close, but I like the Eagles as well to advance.
And the winner of this game, they have an easy, somewhat easy path. There's nothing easy in the playoffs, but an easier path than most to possibly go past the third round, because Cypress Wood and the Woodlands are right there in they face the winner of that game. And obviously, we talked earlier this week, the Woodlands isn't the same Woodlands team over the last few years. So the winner of the game could be making a surprising, sneaky, deep playoff run potentially.
And then you have, let's see, one of the marquee games at the Class 5A level in our coverage area, McKinney North and Lancaster. Friday, 7 o'clock out at Irving's Joy and Ralph Ellis Stadium.
Are you surprised that Kendrick picked McKinney North on the picket line?
I should also clarify, sorry, I didn't even go over what the overall picks were for Prosper Mesquite. It was 4-1 in favor of Prosper. You, me, and then Kendrick and Taylor, who's still picking games for us. We're all going with the Eagles, and then Devin Hassan taking the Skeeters to advance. Again, when all things are equal, you just kind of go with what you know a bit better, and I can see why Devin sided with the Skeeters. It's a very, very close game, though.
But I don't think McKinney North and Lancaster is as close.
Oh, well.
I really don't.
We will see.
You saw Lancaster.
I did, for sure. It's for the second straight week, you get a cliched matchup of just explosive offense versus Lancaster's shutdown defense. They did a really good job taming the Colony. I mean, I talked about it a little bit on Monday's podcast, that really just outside of a couple chunk plays and this one sustained drive that they had late in the first half, the Colony really never found much of a rhythm at all. And just the job that secondary did, almost completely negating, Keith Miller, one of the top receivers in the Metroplex, holding him to just 2 receptions for 2 yards. Miles Price had a big kickoff return, but he wasn't his normal explosive self in the running or receiving games. They've got a lot of speed, but that's the thing. What does it mean though when you're facing what has been like the most unstoppable offense in the Metroplex among 5A teams at least? No one has figured out a recipe for how to slow down this North team. There's just so many weapons with 4 different receivers that can attack
Wakeland kind of did, but
you just got to outscore them.
Still gave up 48 points.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Like no one's figured out a way to consistently slow them down. You could say that John Tyler perhaps did, but that was a bad weather game, and the elements maybe factored into McKinney North only scoring 36 in that game. But they're so deep at receiver. It's not just J.J. Henry and Brandon Frazier and Sean Mansour. You got Manny Fincher there in the backfield and Dylan Markowitz, who runs that system about as effectively as it can be run. Completing almost 3/4 of his passes. It's a machine. But again, Lancaster's defense has getting to see them firsthand against an offense that you could argue that maybe the system isn't as just bulletproof as North has been. But as far as just the top shelf talent that the Colony has, you could say that's higher than what North has, just because when you look at Miles Price, Texas Tech, Christian Gonzalez, I guess he did. He flipped from Purdue to Colorado.
Same as Keith Miller.
Keith Miller, there's a ton of skill position talent at the Colony that Lancaster really seemed to kind of get a pretty firm grasp of. And then with Lancaster, what they have on offense is something that I wish we had been able to see what Seth McGowan could have done against McKinney North in that regular season finale. He was too injured to play in that game, but it would have been a nice gauge to see how North handles a true workhorse running back.
Because Lancaster has one of those.
Trey Bradford. Yeah. Trey Bradford was the star of that game on Thursday, at least on offense. He had almost 250 rushing yards, really helped wear down the Colony late to help Lancaster pull away for a 44-29 victory. And I remember that defining drive of the game, the one that salted it away for good, and Lancaster's just 14 plays and just run after run after run, just milking 7 minutes off that game clock. And the reason Seth McGowan would have been so useful against North is because I think if there is any way to slow down that offense, it's just to limit their snap count, just keep them off the field, and that's by winning time possession, and just grind the clock. And you do that by having a really bruising run game that Poteet, very well could have had if McGowan had played, but we didn't get to see that. So it's kind of an unknown as to whether or not a team can replicate that kind of strategy. Lancaster's not it's not a prolific passing attack or whatever. It was effective enough, to keep to move the chains against the Colony when they had to. But the real bread and butter is that run game. It's not just Trey Bradford, but Karan Neblett, their quarterback Glenn Rice Jr. There's a lot of ways they can attack you on the ground, and I think that's going to be the test for North's defense, is if they can limit that damage, and if they're able to again keep time of possession pretty even, then this should be a game that North at least should put itself in a position to win, I think.
Did you say Glenn Rice Jr.?
Glenn Rice Jr. I don't believe he's related to the basketball player. Now, I don't know that he's not, but I think he has 2 N's in his first name.
Oh, okay. Glenn, that'd be crazy.
It would be. Yeah. I wouldn't pass him. There's a lot of kids who are sons of former athletes in the Metroplex. Yeah. But ultimately, I pick Lancaster in this one just because, again, it is... Oh, yeah. I do think that there is that... the defense is going to be able to get enough stops, and then again the template there with the offense being able to grind down the clock in a way that nobody has against North, and I think it's going to be just enough to squeak this one out. But I don't know I don't think they're going to effectively shut down McKinney North's offense. I don't think anybody can.
No, but they'll keep them in the 30s. I won't be surprised if North is held to maybe even fewer than 30 points, somewhere in the 20s, and they're kind of punched in the mouth a little bit. Look, Lancaster, they've played Duncanville. They've played Highland Park, took them to overtime. You could have said, they could have almost beaten Highland Park. They held them to 28 points in regulation. This Lancaster defense is really stout. They're really good. They are state ranked top 10 for a reason. This is by far and beyond the best team that McKinney North will and has faced this year. And I know Kendrick talked them up all week and even compared them to Highland Park, or said they were better than Highland Park, and I almost lost my mind on last week's podcast. But that defense has too many question marks for McKinney North, and I don't think they've been punched in the mouth yet. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what happened in that Wakeland game. They gave up 62 points to a backup quarterback, which is weird. And then that, granted, the very first game of the year, they barely beat McKinney and whatever. That was first couple weeks of the season, but. I don't know. Lancaster, on paper, is a much better team. From what I've been told, from what you've told me, from what you've seen, what I've looked at, they're a much better team than McKinney North, given all those guys that they have. I just don't trust North's defense. Yeah. Plain and simple. Especially against an elite team like Lancaster.
And that's fair, because the thing with North's defense, and I brought this up when we were previewing the Poteet matchup, is that you can look at the numbers that North has been allowing over the back half of the regular season and say, okay, well, there are tangible signs of improvement.
It's gotten better.
But at the same time, if you look at the offenses they were facing, those offenses weren't exactly of the caliber that they were facing earlier in the season, when they were giving up 600 yards on the regular. So I think Lancaster just might be a bit too tall in order for North. So the two of us are picking McKinney North. Devin is, Taylor is, Kendrick though is.
No, you mean?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Lancaster. Sorry. Sorry. It's 4-1 in favor of Lancaster. The four of us are going with Lancaster. Kendrick though is siding with the Bulldogs to get it done and move on to the third round. We'll see. I think this will be a great game. I don't think it'll be I'm not forecasting a blowout either.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm not saying Lancaster is going to win by 40. I'm just saying I don't see North putting up 50, 60 points like they have against everyone else and winning.
Yeah. All right. Then we have at the 4A level. This one is Friday, 7 o'clock out at Saginaw Chisholm Trail. The game that you're going to be at, Celina versus number 2 or number 3 ranked?
Keep talking. Let me look it up.
Versus state-ranked Waco La Vega. Brian, does Celina time strike for La Vega?
I don't know about that. I mean, it almost struck loud. Yeah, they're number 3.
Okay.
La Vega, obviously, what they did last year and what they've been able to do this year, obviously one of the state's best teams. Their only loss this year is to Argyle, on a team that just beat Celina a couple weeks ago as well. Man, but Celina, they have their work cut out for them. I talked to Coach Elliott this week. He said, they're going to have to win the time possession battle. They're going to have to control the clock, that type of stuff. This offense, he compared them to Paris. Not, wing T style, but the way they like to run the ball. They don't really chunk it down deep. They do a lot of screen passes, dump off passes, run pass options, a bunch of RPOs with their quarterback, and you kind of don't know who's going to run the ball at times. So it's a little tricky there, but he compared them to Paris. Celina beat Paris earlier this year 34-0. I've heard through the grapevine this is a team, the Celina is well equipped defensively to possibly hang with an offense like La Vega.
Okay.
Am I saying are they going to beat them? No. Am I saying are they a better team? No. But
if this were a 10-point game though, in the midway through the third quarter,
I would not be shocked. Yeah. I mean, heck, Celina kept it close with Argyle. That game was 10-6 at halftime or going near halftime, something like that. And then Argyle pulled ahead in the second half, and obviously Argyle's Argyle, but. We'll see. They're gonna have to be able to run the ball, and they're just gonna have to stop the run. I mean, it's easier said than done, but that's what they're gonna have to do. They're definitely going in as underdogs, which is weird to say about Celina, but they are huge underdogs in this game. The coaching staff at Celina knows it. The position group to look out for at La Vega is not their quarterback. It's their skill guys, or which they have a lot of talent at those positions. It's their offensive line. Their offensive line averages about 280. And the reason it's not, they have 3 guys over 300 pounds. The reason it's not more than 280 is because their center is about 220, 225, and it brings down that average. So their offensive line is huge. They're going to pound the football. And if Celina can get in those big boys and fight back in the trenches, we'll see. We might have some Celina magic like they almost had last year in the 3rd round against Argyle.
Well, we'll see. So what were the comments at this, before the Argyle game last year with the bulletin board material?
It was pretty similar to, I don't have the exact quote.
Just paraphrase.
Argyle doesn't know how we play in the playoffs.
There hasn't been any of that from the Celina camp leading up to this one. Okay.
No bulletin board material for La Vega. They know they're underdogs, but they're very confident because if you think about it, last year, so it's kind of overshadowed, Celina's run because of that 3rd round game against Argyle and them almost beating them. You forget that they beat Stephenville in the 2nd round. That Stephenville team was very good. I believe they were state ranked at the time, and Celina was limping and struggling into the playoffs, and then they win that first game against Wilmer Hutchins. They were projected to lose that game as well. They win, and then they go surprisingly beat Stephenville. And Elliott actually compared it to that week, which is also the area around and not the Argyle game, and said that they were big time underdogs against Stephenville, and they had that confidence, they had that Celina mood and mentality, and they went in there and took care of business. And I'm picking La Vega to win. We all picked La Vega to win on the picket line. No surprise there, but I will not be surprised if Celina wins a close one.
Then you have Frisco versus South Oak Cliff as our last game to discuss. This one is Friday, 7:30 p.m. out at the Ford Center at the Star. So Frisco gets a home game out of this, and a chance to avenge a loss to the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last season.
Yeah, they played Sauk, the same building, same round. And it was a 48-16 blowout. I was at that game. South Oak Cliff just had, I remember they had a huge guy in the defensive end. I believe he's a graduate. I can't think of his name right now. He was a D1 guy. He was just in the backfield all game long. They had a bunch of studs on offense. Just doing a little bit of research with South Oak Cliff. Yeah, they're really good once again this year, but they're not quite the same team. A lot of the games they were winning in huge blowout fashion last year. There are some closer games, same schedules last year. So they appear to be not quite as powerful as they were last year. And Frisco is, I believe, much improved from last year. They have a new dynamic in the passing game. Obviously, I've mentioned Chase Lowry's name a million times. Promise I don't have a man crush or anything on Chase Lowry, but he's a game changer. Corey Green's been a game changer. They still have that wing T style, and Jeff Harbert's doing a terrific job, with that program, first year head coach. I'm picking Frisco to win. I do think it's going to be close. I think on my predictions I had it 38-31. But yeah, no, they're not going to just lay down and get totally exposed and destroyed like they were last year against South Oak Cliff. Yeah,
I'm kind of in that same camp with you. Just this kind of validating that the growth that Frisco has made in just 1 year's time. And I think they get the job done on Friday as well. And it was unanimous. So the entire picket line.
I was shocked by that. Yeah. I was shocked. I thought that'd be like a 3-2.
Was it unanimous in favor of Sauk last year? I'd have to go back and check.
Archives,
but yes, nevertheless, the entire staff feels like the Raccoons get their revenge on Friday and beat South Oak Cliff. That is a look at least some of the marquee matchups that are in our coverage area. I did want to quickly shift gears to talk. So first off, you're going to be on Friday. You're going to be covering Celina and Waco La Vega. Despite going to crazy lengths to preview that Allen Rockwall game, I'm not going to be at that game. We're going to have Tim Glaze, our former reporter. Yeah, Tim Glaze is going to be out at Arlington covering that one. Instead, I will be tasked with covering some state volleyball action because the state volleyball tournament is on Friday out of the Curtis Caldwell Center in Garland. I love it. Just right down the street from our office. It's a stone's throw away. So it's versus having to commute down to San Antonio for basketball or Georgetown or Round Rock for some of these other state tournaments. It's nice to have one relatively in our backyard for a change.
Why does the Caldwell Center get the volleyball every year? Do you know the reason why, or is it just that's where
I don't. It's a good venue for it, though. It's a solid venue for that type of setting, and it's relatively new.
I wish basketball was at the Caldwell Center.
It'd be great.
That would be so awesome.
I wish they were all within just 5 minutes of our office.
I don't like driving more than 30 minutes.
But nevertheless, so you have, and sure enough, we've got some pretty solid representation there as per usual. Lovejoy is in the 5A semifinals, and Plano West is in the 6A semifinals. I had a chance to do feature stories on both teams leading up to their respective state semifinal matches on Friday. Friday, and it's just each one has their own unique story as far as kind of how they got to this point. For Plano West, it's been one of they had the loss last year in the state semifinals to Fort Bend Ridgepoint. It was a matchup that they started off so hot, and then Ridgepoint wins a really close second set, and then to hear Plano West retell it, that's when nerves started to kind of creep in, and just the true adversity of okay, our season is legitimately hanging in the balance when that comes into focus, and they just didn't respond well to it, and they lost 3-1. And it's fitting in the sense that so that matchup against Ridgepoint was on November 16th, 2018. It was exactly 1 year later than that they beat Klein in the regional finals at just last weekend to punch their ticket back to state for the second straight season. And wouldn't you know, they draw Ridgepoint once again in the semis on Friday. So they've come full circle in a way. And this is now, I guess, again, the method, the talk has been all season that they've had their focus on the playoffs, to the point where, and they'll be upfront about it, they overlooked parts of the regular season, and it led to some inconsistencies, some up and downs. They had the puzzling loss to Prosper that they avenged later on. And, but nevertheless, though, it was always under the guise that when the playoffs started, that their level of play would fall in line, and you've seen that. They've dropped the third set to Klein in the regional final. That's the only set they've dropped in the playoffs. They've swept everybody else, including the Woodlands in the regional semis, who was a team that beat them earlier on in a tournament in Allen back in August, and they get a chance to validate it all in just on Friday. They get Ridgepoint, a Ridgepoint team that is got a lot of similar pieces from last year. They did, however, graduate their top hitter, Skylar Fields, who's now playing for Texas, starting for Texas at that. So, quality player, and she was kind of the star of that match last year. She had 19 kills and whatnot, but they've still got a strong block with Claire Jeter, who had over 10 blocks in the meeting with West last year. Reagan Rutherford, their star, so very versatile player and whatnot. But they've still got some weapons, still got some experience. But losing that top hitter is going to definitely make West recalibrate its defensive approach. And West, they're just they've grown a bit from last year too. They feel like they've really harnessed kind of the mental strain that they felt last year's semifinal kind of put on them. And then the offense has evolved with you still have Jill Presley and Aman Jai doing their thing, but you have Noel Piatas, who transferred from Prestonwood after winning a state championship over there at the private school level, and she's added a completely new dimension to that offense. They've got Lindsay Zhang and Morgan Carter, who have helped fill that defensive role that Haley Hong held down so well last season. It's a team that's a bit better, just a bit better overall from last season. So we'll see what it means, if it's enough to get that revenge against Ridgepoint. And then even if you win that one, then you got to turn right around and potentially play a team like Byron Nelson, who's ranked number 1 in the nation by USA Today, who I saw just last week, and they beat when they beat Flower Mound in the regional quarterfinals. The reigning state champion Flower Mound got knocked out in 4 sets by Byron Nelson. So if Plano West is going to get its first ever state championship, it's going to be tough. They've got a very, very stout field in the 6A Final Four. I believe Plano West has they have 5 losses on the season. I believe the record was 39-5. Their 5 losses, that's the most of the 4 semifinalists in Class 6A. Just an absolutely loaded field. That is one half of our state coverage. That game is going to be Friday 7 o'clock at the Caldwell Center. Earlier in the afternoon, though, is when Lovejoy takes aim at it's a potential run of another state championship. They're bound for state for the 10th time in the last 12 years. What a run. And that's with a jump up in the classifications. They started off as a 3A school, and then they made the jump up, and they have not missed a step.
Just plug it in and keep on going.
And it's looking at this particular team, they graduated 9 seniors from last year's team. So there's kind of a sense of okay, well, what do we really have this year? They didn't exactly enter the year with okay, it's state championship or bust, even though that's a program that kind of carries itself with that level of expectation. This team was taking the approach of, we just want to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and we'll see what that means. And well, it means number 1 ranking in the state
the entire season.
It means 46 wins. I think it was their 5th consecutive 40-win season. And again, Frisco Liberty, you gave a match that you were at. I mean, they gave them all they could handle. And then talking to the players yesterday, it's that performance there and being able to pull that one out. That's when they began to really feel okay, we might be able to get this done again. What were your impressions just getting a look at Lovejoy and that effort against Liberty and Jenna Wennis?
They have have no weakness. They're just all around, loaded. They have the size at the net. They have Callie Kamoa. Her defense is phenomenal. The libero, I believe, is what she.
For sure, yeah.
And then
an Allen transfer.
Cecily Brimschreiber. I hope I'm saying that right.
Brimschreiber.
Headed to TCU. She's not very tall. She's, you think of most dominant outside hitters like a Jenna Winnis, 6 foot and up, 6'2". Brimschreiber's got to be 5'9" tops, and she could just soar over the net. I saw her play against Centennial in the first round. I saw her play against Liberty in the third round. Both games she had over 20 kills. She had 25 kills against Liberty, and she's, in my opinion, just seeing a small sample size in the playoffs, she's their best player.
Yeah.
And all their best players are really juniors.
Yeah.
So it's like they should be back to do this all again next year. And they just, like I said, they don't have a weakness. They're a machine. When they need a point from Bramschreiber, they get it. When they need a point from someone else, they get it. They have so many players that are so multifaceted and that do the same thing. They don't have one player that's just a good outside hitter or one player that's just good at defense. Everyone on that team is really, really good at so many different things, and they're just so sound. The volleyball does not touch the floor very often when the ball sails over the net on their side of the court, and they're just so sound. They're so well coached, and man, they've swept everyone except for Liberty in the playoffs. And Liberty, man, the fact that Lovejoy was able to come back in that fifth set after losing the fourth set the way they did, 36-34, which was one of the craziest sets I've ever seen in my short time of watching and covering volleyball. It was amazing that they were able to come back and do that, because Liberty took a 4-1 lead in that fifth set, and then they came right back and went on a 9-0 run in the fifth set. Who does that against a team like Liberty? You just reel off 9 straight points and just flip a switch. It was really special to see.
It's that mindset that program has that you don't find elsewhere, because even though a lot of these kids are seeing their first extensive time in that varsity lineup, I mean, a lot of them were on the team last year, but most of them were either role players or came off or just rode the bench and whatnot. But you have seen so many of them, and that's what kind of made this season so much of an unknown, because they're not a senior-heavy team. Like you mentioned, they've only got 4 seniors on the entire roster. It's mostly those juniors and whatnot is where a lot of the leadership has come from this season. So a lot of those players, though, it's just that you plug them in and you don't miss a step. And it just comes with players that have, even before they even suited up for the varsity team, you kind of grew up, though. When they were younger was back when Lovejoy was raking off, 5 consecutive state titles. So you kind of grew up, just well aware of that standard and what it means to play for that program. So it's almost like this winning begets winning mindset. And that when you get there, it's just you have this expectation, how to take care of business at this juncture of the season, and you've seen that, and you saw it firsthand with that kind of resilience and that mental fortitude, just because not every team is built to overcome a 34-32 loss in the fourth set of a playoff match.
When you met with them, did they bring up the Liberty game, and did they bring up that fifth set or that fourth or fifth set?
They talked about it in the sense that was the match that really kind of once they beat Liberty like that, because I was asking, okay, so where did y'all kind of, I guess, see this team begin to, when did winning a state championship become okay, we feel like we might be able to get this done this year? And they talked about, on the one hand, they were really strong over the back half of district play in 10-5A. That's when their level of play went up, and they were just not only sweeping everyone, but just blowing them out. And then when they pulled out that tough one against Liberty, because that was the first time, in a while that they had really been pushed. I mean, you look at the matches that they've lost, 4 of their 5 losses are to either Plano West or Byron Nelson, who are competing in the 6A semifinals over there. So with the pressure...
And those were back in August.
Oh, yeah. So the pressure that Liberty was able to put on them, I mean, they just hadn't felt anything like that, really. And to pull that out, though, it speaks a lot to, first off, what Liberty had and what Jenna Winnis and that crew had cooking that season.
I've been telling you, I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And now, we'll see again if they've, they still have 2 wins, left on the table to get it done. And it's, they're catching a Friendswood team that's coming in really hot. You look at that record and it might not jump out at you. They have, it's like 35-17, something to that tune. But a lot of those losses came really early in the season when they were a little banged up. And they come in having won, I want to say it was 18 of their past 19 matches. They actually, a lot of their success coincides with they had an acquisition mid-season. They had a player move in from Italy, who's become their top hitter, and definitely she's a lefty, so it's a different schematic wrinkle to prepare for. Coach Mitchell was saying that he's never seen a team that runs as much of its offense through their middles as his Friendswood team does. It's a different challenge altogether for Lovejoy. So we'll see what it means on Friday. That matchup is going to be at 1 o'clock out at the Caldwell Center. The winner of that match could get, I believe it's Alamo Heights and Canyon Randall over in the other half, and I think Canyon Randall might be ranked number 2 in the state behind Lovejoy according to the TGCA. And I want to say it was along those same lines last season, and like that's what kind of the matchup was. Okay, well, let's see if we can finally get that long-awaited Lovejoy Randall match at the state tournament, and it didn't happen and whatnot. But we'll see. Yeah, I mean, it's like Lovejoy's. You don't think of it as if you go 5 years between state championships, like that doesn't sound like a big deal for any program, but for Lovejoy, a program that really, like, their volleyball program in general is so young. The school only opened back in 2006. And they won 5 consecutive state titles from 08 to 2012. So in their second ever playoff appearances is when they started winning state championships. So to then, now to be at a point where their last state title was in 2014. So only in Lovejoy terms is this considered a championship drought. Yeah. But and they'll try to halt that dry spell on Friday and potentially Saturday out of the Caldwell Center in Garland. So that's where I'll be. Yeah, I'll be covering both those matches on Friday, and then if either of those two advance to Saturday's state finals, I'll be out there as well. So I'll be following along on Twitter. I'll be following along to see all the fun times out at Arlington between Allen and Rockwall. But yes, unfortunately, I will not be covering that matchup. I'll be on volleyball duty on Friday. So let's look at what we've got cooking though for our coverage slates. And yeah, that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. Folks, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.